I'd driven 16 hours straight from Ohio to Virginia, through rain truck stop coffee and the kind of endless highway that makes you think about every choice you've ever made, all to see my son, Ryan, the boy I raised alone after his mother passed, the one I worked double shifts for, sold my workshop for, just to put him through law school in New York. When he opened the door, I expected a smile, maybe a hug. Instead, he leaned close and whispered, "Dad, don't say you're my father. Just tell them you're an old family friend from Ohio." It hit like a nail through the heart. My hand loosened on the suitcase handle. The wheels rolled over the perfect brick driveway like they belonged here more than I did. I looked past him. Pristine lawns, white fences, cars so polished they blinded you. Everything about this neighborhood screamed success, but right now success was telling me to keep my mouth shut. I swallowed the burn in my throat, and I nodded. Because sometimes the best revenge doesn't start with shouting. It starts with silence, with remembering every sacrifice, every dollar, every long night that made this life possible, and knowing one day they'll find out exactly who built the foundation they're standing on. If you've ever been told to hide who you are, stay with me. You're going to want to hear the rest of this story. 16 hours on the road, from Ohio's cracked highways to Virginia's smooth interstates. The rain in West Virginia had been relentless, turning every mile into a fight against the wheel. I'd stopped twice, once for black coffee and a chipped mug at a truck stop diner, once for gas where the clerk didn't even look up from his phone. Every hour I pictured my son's face. Ryan, the boy I raised alone after his mom passed. The boy I'd watched fall asleep over law books in a cramped apartment back when success meant making rent. By the time I pulled into his street, my hands ached from gripping the wheel. Silverwood. Perfect lawns trimmed to regulation height. Mailbox numbers in neat gold paint. Every driveway had a car worth more than my old Ford F-150. Ryan's house was no different. White siding, black shutters, porch light glowing like a welcome sign. He opened the door before I could knock. The same brown eyes. The same lopsided smile, just smaller now, tighter. He stepped close, too close, and whispered, "Don't say you're my father. Just tell them you're an old family friend from Ohio." The words hit harder than the winter wind behind me. My fingers loosened on the suitcase handle. It rolled forward a few inches, wheels rattling on perfect brick. I looked at him, at the son I'd sacrificed everything for, and I nodded. Because in that moment I knew this wasn't the time to speak. It was the time to remember and to wait. Ryan didn't always live in a house with white shutters and polished floors. There was a time when his world was one-bedroom apartments and second-hand furniture. After his mom passed, I learned what it meant to stretch a dollar until it screamed. Days in the workshop, nights on construction sites. Winter meant working with frozen fingers. Summer meant coming home drenched in sweat. I sold my first set of craftsman tools, the ones my father gave me when I turned 18, just to cover Ryan's first semester at Ohio State. When that wasn't enough, I sold the workshop itself. A place that smelled of sawdust and oil, where Ryan used to sit on the bench, swinging his legs, asking me about the world. Every sacrifice had a reason. Every long night was for a future I believed in. For the boy who once hugged me tight after getting an A in English, saying, "We're gonna make it, Dad." When he got into Columbia Law, I took on triple shifts. My back ached every day, but my chest felt light with pride. I imagined him standing in a courtroom, head high, name on the door. And when he called about this house in Silverwood, his voice bright with excitement, I didn't hesitate. I wired him $180,000 from selling the last of my equipment. "Dad, this is for our family," he'd said. Back then, I believed him. Silverwood wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a performance. Every lawn looked like it had been measured with a ruler. Grass trimmed exactly to regulation height. Flower beds bursting with colors that matched the season like someone had ordered them from a catalog. Mailboxes stood in perfect alignment, each with neat gold numbers. Every driveway held a car so polished it could blind you in the afternoon sun. BMWs, Teslas, the occasional black Mercedes. My old Ford F-150 rattled into this parade like a rusted drum in a string quartet. People noticed. They always do. Curtains shifted. A woman in yoga pants paused mid-jog to glance over her shoulder. Ryan's house sat 3 blocks in white siding and black shutters. Porch light glowing welcome mat without a speck of dirt. Even the flag on the pole looked ironed. As I parked at the curb, I saw him through the front window shirt. Crisp tie, loosened just enough to look casual, a drink in hand. He looked settled here, like he belonged. I stepped onto the brick path leading to the porch. The air smelled of fresh mulch and something artificial, maybe the vanilla-scented candles every house in this place seemed to burn. The sound of my boots on perfect brick was too loud, too real. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into a place that had no space for the man I'd been all my life. And yet, I was the reason this house stood here at all. The knock on my truck window startled me. A man in khaki shorts and a baseball cap leaned in smiling like we'd known each other for years. "Hey there. You must be new to the neighborhood." Before I could answer, the front door opened. Ryan stepped out fast, his polished loafers clicking against the brick. He slid between me and the man like a defensive player blocking a shot. "This is Mike Ryan," said quickly. "Old friend from Ohio. We go way back." Old friend. 2 words that felt heavier than the steel beams I used to carry. I stood there, forcing my mouth into something that might pass for a smile. The neighbor Bill, he introduced himself, asked about Ohio Weather College football gas prices. I answered in short sentences, my voice flat. Bill didn't notice, or maybe he did, but chose not to. Ryan's hand rested casually on my shoulder, but his grip was tight. Directing, controlling. The way you guide someone away from the edge of a conversation you don't want them to have. When Bill finally waved goodbye and walked back to his pristine lawn, Ryan exhaled. It was the first honest sound I'd heard from him all day. Inside, I carried my duffel past gleaming floors and spotless furniture, every surface reflecting the life he'd built here. A life that apparently didn't have room for the word Dad. I didn't call him out, not yet. Some truths are too heavy to drop without warning. The dining room looked like it belonged in a magazine. Long oak table polished to a mirror shine. Crystal glasses catching the light from a chandelier that probably cost more than my truck. Ryan sat at the head like a CEO in a boardroom. To his right, Claire, his wife. Perfect hair, pearl earrings, that subtle smile people wear when they know they're being watched. 2 kids sat between them, barely glancing up from their plates. I was placed at the far end. Physically separated like a guest who didn't quite belong in the family photo. The steak was cooked perfectly seasoned, just enough to impress. But every bite stuck in my throat. Not because of the food, but because of the silence. Ryan talked about a corporate merger. Claire chimed in with details about last weekend's charity gala. The kids scrolled on their phones under the table thumbs, moving in silent rhythm. When the conversation finally paused, I tried. Took on a big renovation last month. Rebuilt a house's foundation from the ground up. Claire's fork froze mid-air. Ryan's smile tightened. "That's nice, Mike," he said before turning back to a story about wine tastings in Napa. I stopped talking. I knew when a table wasn't built for me, and as I looked down the polished length of oak between us, I realized It wasn't just the table. It was the life they'd built on top of mine. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The guest room felt too clean, too untouched, like no one had ever lived here. White bedding, generic artwork. A welcome card that said, "Make yourself at home," in looping script. The irony wasn't lost on me. Around midnight, I gave up trying to sleep. The house was quiet except for the steady hum of central air. I walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. My boots were too loud against the hardwood, so I stepped carefully, avoiding spots that creaked during the house tour. Passing the laundry room, I noticed the door slightly ajar. Inside, rows of labeled shelves. Towels stacked by size. Cleaning supplies in perfect order. And on the highest shelf, a box marked in Claire's neat handwriting, "Important documents." I told myself it was none of my business, but my hand was already reaching up. Inside, mortgage papers, insurance policies, and the original property deed. Ryan's name, yes, but mine too. Bold letters, primary owner, Michael Harris. Ownership percentage, 80%. My stomach tightened. There it was. Proof. The foundation of this house wasn't money from Ryan's corner office. It was my lifetime of calloused hands and sleepless nights. I took out my phone and started photographing each page. Every signature, every clause. Each click of the camera felt like another nail in the frame of a truth they'd tried to hide. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, scrolling through the photos I'd just taken. Each image was a piece of a puzzle they never expected me to put together. Contracts, bank transfers, receipts from selling my tools. 40 years of work reduced to black ink on white paper. The easy move would have been to march into Ryan's room, wake him up, and drop the truth on his polished floors like a wrecking ball. But easy moves rarely win the game. Instead, I powered off my phone and slid it into my duffel. Some things needed time to settle, time to hit harder. I thought about my father, how he used to say, "Measure twice, cut once." He was talking about carpentry, but the same rules applied here. One wrong cut and you ruin the whole frame. From the hallway, I could hear faint laughter from the TV downstairs. Ryan's voice mixed with Claire's casual, confident, two people who thought their world was secure. They had no idea the ground under their perfect foundation was already shifting. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to make them understand who put every brick of this life in place. And when the moment came, I wanted it to be in daylight where nothing could hide. The next afternoon, Ryan knocked on my door with a practiced smile. "Big neighborhood gathering tonight. Claire thinks it'd be good for you to meet everyone." Translation, another performance. By 7 p.m., we were walking across perfectly manicured lawns toward the Miller's backyard. String lights hung between oak trees. A grill smoked in the corner, sending the smell of expensive ribeye into the cool air. "Remember?" Ryan said quietly, straightening his cufflinks Ohio friend. Construction consultant. His eyes locked on mine, half warning, half plea. I just nodded. Inside the circle of light, neighbors mingled like actors on a stage. Laughter rose and fell on cue. Every conversation seemed to orbit around money vacation homes, stock tips, private school admissions. When someone asked me what I did, I said I build foundations. Ryan coughed into his drink, steering the conversation to the California weather I supposedly knew so well. I let him, for now. As I stood there, sipping a beer I didn't really want, I watched him float from group to group, shaking hands, telling jokes. Claire worked to the crowd like she'd been born for it. Pearls catching the light every time she tilted her head. They looked like they belonged here. And maybe they did. But deep down I knew something no one else in that backyard did. The foundation of their perfect life had my name written all over it. The next morning, the house was quiet. Ryan had left early for golf. Claire took the kids to some weekend art class in town. I walked through the halls without anyone watching. No tight smiles. No whispered reminders about who I was supposed to be. In the garage, I noticed everything was arranged with military precision holiday boxes, stacked neatly, tools hung in perfect rows. But behind a row of Christmas decorations, there was a dusty cardboard box. The handwriting on the side made my chest tighten. Old Stuff Ryan. I pulled it down. The flaps creaked as I opened it, and suddenly I was holding my son's childhood in my hands. A faded baseball glove I'd bought him when he was 9. A photo of us standing by the lake in Minnesota, holding up the first fish he'd ever caught. A Father's Day card in uneven handwriting. Best dad ever. Each item was a frozen moment in time, proof that there was once a boy who was proud to call me Dad. And yet all of it had been hidden away. Not destroyed, but buried. As if the memories themselves were something to be ashamed of. I sat on the cold concrete floor, holding that photo. The boy in it was grinning like we'd conquered the world together. Now, the man he'd become couldn't even let the neighbors know I existed. I slid the photo into my wallet next to the property deed. 2 different kinds of proof, both telling the same story. By mid-afternoon, the house was empty again. I sat at the kitchen table, the photo for Minnesota, leaning against my coffee mug. The morning light caught my son's childhood smile, making it harder to swallow the lump in my throat. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't dialed in years, Thomas Reed, attorney at law. We'd worked together when I bought my place in Ohio, back when Ryan still asked me for advice instead of pretending I didn't exist. "Mike, it's been a while." Tom's voice came warm, steady. "What can I do for you?" I laid it out clean. The deed. The 80% ownership. The down payment that had drained my life savings. He listened without interrupting the way good lawyers do. Then he said, "You have full legal control as primary owner. Without your signature, they can't refinance, sell, or make major property changes. If you wanted, you could reclaim occupancy immediately." I stared out the kitchen window at the perfectly cut lawn, the same one Ryan paid someone else to maintain. "I'm not looking to humiliate them, Tom," I said slowly, "but I want them to remember whose foundation they're standing on." "We can prepare the paperwork in a day," he replied. "The question is, when do you want to play your hand?" I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. "Not yet. I want it to land where it hurts the most, right in the truth they've been hiding from." Sunday evening, they came back earlier than planned. The garage door rattled open and I heard Ryan's voice, upbeat, telling the kids to unload the bags. Claire followed her heels, clicking across the tile. I was sitting in the living room, not in the guest chair they'd assigned me, but in the recliner Ryan usually claimed. The Minnesota photo sat on the coffee table right next to a neatly printed copy of the property deed. Ryan noticed first. His stride faltered. Claire's smile froze in place, the kind you hold when you're not sure if the conversation ahead will be civil or catastrophic. "Everything goes smoothly while we were gone?" Ryan asked, trying for casual. "Very smoothly," I said, leaning back. "I even got some business taken care of." I picked up the deed, holding it so the bold letters of my name caught the light. Claire glanced at it, her fingers tightening on the strap of her purse. Ryan's jaw shifted, small movement. "Big tell. I've been thinking," I continued, "about ownership and responsibility, about who really built the foundation of this place." Ryan opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "This isn't a discussion for the kids, but we are going to have it, and soon." The silence that followed was heavy, pressing down on every polished surface in that room. For the first time since I arrived, they weren't the ones in control of the performance. We waited until the kids had gone upstairs. The sound of their footsteps faded, replaced by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Look, Mike, whatever you're thinking." "It's not what I'm thinking, Ryan," I cut in. "It's what's written here." I tapped the deed with my finger, the paper sharp against my skin. 80% ownership. My name first, yours second. That's the truth. Claire's voice was softer, but it carried a tremor. "We never meant to disrespect you. It's just, people here judge quickly. We didn't want the kids to be treated differently because of me," I asked. Her silence was the answer. Ryan sighed the kind of long, tired breath that comes when excuses run out. "This neighborhood, it's about appearances. I thought if we kept certain things private, it'd be easier." "Private?" I said, my voice low. "You mean hiding your father, the man who emptied his savings so you could buy this place?" Claire's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. Ryan did, and that told me more than any words could. I let the silence stretch long enough for both of them to feel the weight of what they'd done. Then I said, "Truth has a way of showing up whether you invite it or not." Ryan finally spoke, his voice tight. "So, what happens now? You planning to take the house?" I leaned back, folding the deed neatly. "No, I'm not taking it from you. I'm just changing the terms of who it belongs to." Their brows furrowed in unison. Claire glanced at Ryan, but he only shook his head, confused. I pulled another document from my bag, the crisp pages catching the kitchen light. "It's already signed. The house is going into a trust for your son Ethan. He'll own it outright when he turns 25 if he earns a college degree." Claire's hand went to her mouth. Ryan blinked like he hadn't heard me right. "You're skipping us?" he asked, voice cracking. "Think of it as skipping the pretense," I said evenly. "You've built walls to keep me out. But the foundation, the real ownership, will go to someone who still has time to understand where it came from." Ryan's face shifted from shock to something colder. "You think this is teaching him a lesson?" "It's teaching him the truth," I replied. "That you don't get to rewrite history just because it doesn't match the picture you want to show your neighbors." The room went still. Even the clock seemed to stop. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw it in Ryan's eyes, not anger, not even guilt, but the realization that the performance was over. I stood on the porch, the late evening air cool against my skin. Behind me, the house was silent, too silent for a place that used to buzz with rehearsed pleasantries. Ryan and Claire stayed inside, probably replaying my words in their heads. I didn't need to see their faces again tonight. The truth was out. The documents were signed. And the future of this house was set in stone. I took one last look at the manicured lawn, the spotless driveway, the facade they'd fought so hard to protect. Then I looked past it to Ethan's small face in the upstairs window, watching me go. I gave him a nod, not a goodbye, but a promise. My truck's engine rumbled to life, that same old sound they once tried to hide from the neighbors. But tonight, it wasn't a source of shame. It was the sound of freedom, of closure. As I pulled onto the quiet street, I thought about all the stories, like mine families divided by appearances rebuilt on truth. If you've been here with me through this journey, maybe you've got your own story to tell, and maybe you'll stick around for the next one. Because revenge isn't always about taking back what's yours. Sometimes it's about leaving something behind that can't be erased. Subscribe and let's keep building these stories together. It's been 6 months since that night. The papers are still in my desk drawer, untouched, but their weight has shifted. They're no longer just proof of ownership. They're a reminder of a turning point. Ryan calls more often now. Not to talk about deals or important people, but to ask about Ethan's school projects or the best way to fix a loose fence post. Claire's voice has changed to less guarded, more real. And Ethan, he's not just the grandson I see on holidays anymore. He runs into my arms when I visit, pulls me into the garage to work on projects, and asks questions about every tool on the wall. I tell him stories about his dad when he was little, about the meaning of building something with your own hands. The kind of stories I wish I'd told sooner. We don't talk much about that night, but we don't need to. The walls they built between us didn't crumble overnight, but cracks have formed and light is getting through. I can see it in how they introduce me now. This is my dad. No qualifiers, no careful lies. The trust remains in place. Ethan will inherit the house one day, but more importantly, he'll inherit the truth of where it came from. That was always the real goal. If you've been listening to this, you know revenge can take many forms. Sometimes the best revenge is making them live with the truth until it changes them. Subscribe and I'll tell you more stories where justice comes quietly, but stays forever.